warm welcome to our Sunday worship for the 24th of May. It seems to me that we're kind of living in between times at the moment. Some of us have gone back to work, although some of us have always been working through these times. And some of what we think of as normal has started slowly to return. And yet so much of normal life remains closed off to us. We hope and pray that these slow improvements will continue. And we hope and pray that there won't be a second virus spike. For our thoughts today, I've chosen to look at some of the words of a famous mystic who lived 600 years ago, Julian of Norwich. She was the first woman to write a literary work. Her revelations of divine love was and is a valuable insight into the nature of God and God's relationship with creation. But more of that later. We start with a song which has become an evergreen and favourite of most churches around the world, Shine, Jesus, Shine. For Songster's contribution this week, we go back to a meeting from May last year. The song is I Will Wait For You. The words of this song are meant to convey words of challenge from Jesus to us. And the person who is waiting in this case, in this song, is Jesus himself, as he waits for each and every one of us. This is a recording from one of our meetings, so you'll hear some lovely additions from some of the children who were present at that meeting. But for me, that adds a blessing all of its own. The songsters with I Will Wait For You.
For our prayers this morning, we're going to think about one of Julian of Norwich's showings about the hazelnut. Julian saw that all of creation was created, is loved, and is preserved by God. For Julian, the hazelnut was an important image of this. She wrote in one of her earliest showings, "And in this he showed me something small, no bigger than a hazelnut, lying in the palm of my hand, as it seemed to me, and it was as round as a ball. I looked at it with the eye of my understanding and thought, what can this be? I was amazed that it could last, for I thought that because of its littleness it would suddenly have fallen into nothing. And I was answered in my understanding. It lasts and always will, because God loves it. And thus everything has been through the love of God. In this little thing I saw 3 properties. The first is that God made it. The second is that God loves it. The third is that God preserves it. But what did I see in it? It is that God is the creator and the protector and the lover. For until I am substantially united to him, I can never have perfect rest or true happiness until, that is, I am so attached to him that there can be no created thing between my God and me." For Julian, the hazelnut was a sign of hope, a sign of the power of God that sustains us. What things or events are signs of hope for you? Perhaps in these next few moments you can think about those things which are signs of hope for you, but also pray about those things that are on your heart and your mind, and the names that are going to come up on the screen. To conclude our time of prayer this morning, I'm going to read to you a poem by Barbara Bishop called Mother Julian. A little thing you showed her, the size of a hazelnut. On the palm of her hand, round like a ball it lay. What is it, she said, this little fragile thing? It is all that is made, you said, and exists now and forever, for I love it. This little fragile thing, all that is made. Thousands of millions of galaxies, billions of billions of stars, whirling in immeasurable space, limitless seeming, incomprehensible, vast, unimaginably vast, brain-whirling, mind-numbing, yet sparkling in simple beauty on mountain lake, because you love it all. These little things, microscopic life, primal sea plants, 15,000 intricate designs, infinitesimally small, maintained through millions of years, such beauty for Earth's basic food, such lavish waste, such prodigality, because you love Earth so. These fragile things, strange animal creatures, two-footed furless mammals, slow-developing creatures, born vulnerable and weak, large-brained, mind-filled creatures, flesh and spirit, hunting, hurting, hating, longing, laughing, loving, knowing, though not knowing, that you love them. This little fragile thing, final creature of them all, cell and primate recapitulating, burning, blissful love, condensed to human measure, babe in manger laid, length, breadth, height and depth, of stars and cells and souls encompassing, such beauty for Earth's heavenly food, such lavish prodigality for humankind, and in it all, because you love it all. Amen.
The Sing Company are one of the most popular parts of our meetings, and every song they sing is always received with great enthusiasm. However, some songs they sing have that extra something, and their song for today is a great example of this. They always sing this song with all their hearts. It's a contemporary take on the old song, I'll Stand for Christ. John's Gospel, chapter 14, verses 15 to 21. If you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him, because it neither knows or sees him. But you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you. I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. Before long the world will not see me any more, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. On that day you will realize that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. Whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. The one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love them and show myself to them. Time for us to sing once again a song which describes perfectly for us the nature of Jesus, meekness and majesty.
Meekness and majesty, manhood and deity, in perfect harmony, the man who is God, Lord of eternity, dwells in humanity, kneels in humility, and washes our feet. Oh, what a mystery, meekness and majesty, bow down and worship, for this is your God, this is your God.
The tune of Shenandoah, named after a river in America, is a favourite for many. The Salvation Army has always been good at taking tunes and adding sacred words to them. In this case, it's the words amid all the traffic of the ways, the second verse of which could have been sung by Julian of Norwich. And those words say, a little shrine of quietness, all sacred to thyself, where you shall all my soul possess, and I may find myself. The band with an arrangement of that lovely tune, Shenandoah. In these difficult days, we often look for inspiration in other things, in other people. I think that's why music has become such a powerful motivator during these times. It's why I have tried very hard to include music in these online meetings. But added to things like the arts, we have, I sense, been looking for those words of inspiration as well. Words have a great power for good or for ill. And today I want to hopefully try and encourage you, not with my words, but with the words of somebody who lived 600 years ago in the 14th century. And in these days of strong man statesmanship, I want us to think on the words of one very humble woman. That's Julian of Norwich. This remarkable woman will, for some, need no introduction. Her words have been that source of inspiration and blessing for 600 years. but the background to her life and writings is really informative to our own situation today. And these words that she left us will, I hope, inspire you as well. Her real name is not known, as she, in all humility, never signed her writings. We call her Julie, and we think after the church in Norwich, which became her home literally for years. She lived at a time of great social upheaval and unrest. There were wars and epidemics throughout Europe. We all know the name of the worst epidemic to affect so many at that time, the Black Death, or the Plague. Norwich, Julian's home, had a population of around about 25,000 at the time that she was born, and 3/4 of that population in that city were to succumb to the plague. You can only imagine what such suffering could do to a young mind. Her world and ours, whilst being vastly different in so many ways, also share so much in common. We too face a deadly epidemic and great social unrest around the world. And Julian shares with us in the sense that she became isolated, not just for months, but actually for many years. When she was 31, she became gravely ill, and a priest was called to give her the last rites. It was while she was receiving the last rites that Julian experienced her 16 visions, all in the one night. She called them her showings. As the priest held a crucifix in front of her, Julian saw Jesus suffering on the cross and heard him speaking to her for several hours. Like all mystics, she realized that what Jesus was saying about himself, he was simultaneously saying about all of reality. Afterwards, Julian felt the need to go apart and reflect upon this profound experience. She asked her bishop to enclose her in an anchor hold built against the side of St. Julian's Church in Norwich. Julian, as we know, was later named after that same church. The anchor hold had a window into the church that allowed Julian to attend Mass, and another window so she could counsel and pray over people who came to visit her. Now, such anchor holds were found all over 13th and 14th century Europe, and those who went into them voluntarily remained there for the rest of their days and were known as anchorites. She initially wrote a short account of what she saw in those visions, her showings. But later, after many years of reflection in that hold, she wrote her revelations of divine love. She was uneducated but had learned to read and write, and wrote her revelations in the local colloquial Middle English of her day. Now, her work wasn't copied widely in her own time, primarily because she was a woman, but also because her writings would have been seen as subversive to the medieval church, and actually in some ways are still subversive today. But copies were kept and emerged in later years to be translated and now inspire us. Her confinement was by choice, ours is not. But she used that confinement to reflect on the nature of God and his interactions with his creation. And I want to offer you some of her insights today in the hope that they not just bring comfort but also inspiration. One of her most profound insights was the idea of our being united with our Creator. Oneness, or wanting, as she puts it. She wants us to see that union, that intimate relationship. She wants to see us as being as one with each and every part of God's creation. And she wants us to see that that has always been God's purpose for us, that we should all be one with him. Jesus and the Spirit are the fullest expression of the unity of relationship with God. In Jesus we see God before us. Through the Spirit we likewise enjoy that same unity with God that Jesus had. Jesus said to his disciples in John's Gospel in chapter 14, he said, "On that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I in you. This warning for Julian is really how God's love is made complete. She says of that union between ourselves and God, I love you and you love me, and our love shall never be separated in two. Her insights are, I believe, vastly profound. She saw that we were all made to not just reflect, but to be divine, as Jesus was divine. That all creation, without exception, was one with God. She says, this beloved soul was preciously knitted to God in its making, by a knot so subtle and so mighty that it is wonned in God. In this wonning, it is made endlessly holy. She says we are knitted together with God when we were first made. Now, to me, that's a profound and wonderful thought. It echoes the words of Psalm 139 that Nikki spoke to us about last week. And it's a wonderful truth that we are knitted together with God from our first moments. In one passage, Julian talks about how she perceives a hazelnut lying in the palm of her hand. And she believes that God had poured himself into that hazelnut. And so that hazelnut came to represent the whole of reality for her. And the truth that God was in the hazelnut and in each and every one of us. Father Richard Rohr, a Franciscan priest, commenting on this revelation of Julian's, says this. He says, this is not some 21st century leap of logic. This is not pantheism or New Age optimism. This is the whole point. Radical union is the recurring experience of the saints and mystics of all religions. We do not have to discover or prove it. We only have to retrieve what has been rediscovered and enjoyed again and again by those who desire and seek God and love. When you think you have discovered it, you'll be just like Jacob when he awoke from his sleep and shouted, you were here all the time, and I never knew it. Richard Rohr reminding us that Julian simply discovered a profound truth that was there all along. Another of her insights, which is so important to us for this, and indeed any age, is that there is no anger in God. In Julian's day, with its vast suffering brought about by war and disease, explanations abounded that all the suffering came from a vengeful, angry God as punishment for all the wrongdoings of the people. Even in our own post-Enlightenment thinking, there are some Christians who have chosen to use the same arguments about our present troubles. Or there will be those who have an axe to grind against God and point the finger to accuse God of deliberately causing our sufferings. It is true that there are passages in Scripture which talk of the wrath of God, and our evangelical leanings over the last 100 years have encouraged us to believe in a God who punishes. But friends, I have to be completely truthful with you. The older I get, the more I see of what anger has done to the world, the hurt and harm it constantly causes. The more I see of how punishment alone doesn't resolve anything, the more I find comfort in the truth that God is love. And moreover, that his love is the pattern for our lives and for living. So for me, either God is love or he is angry and full of wrath. I am no longer sure that he can be both. Julian, 600 years ago, felt the same. Now I throw this out there today with a certain sense of trepidation, because it flies in the face of some of the things that my own church teaches. So I would encourage you to read around the subject of God's anger and punishment and judgment for yourselves. You'll hopefully discover that what we believe as the orthodox accepted view of God's anger has not always been the view of the whole church. And today many Christian teachers and scholars would echo Julian in insisting that God is not angry. God is love. Now Julian says it's all about grace. And grace is not a word of anger. It is a word of love. This is what Julian says about grace. Grace transforms our failings full of dread into abundant, endless comfort. Our failings full of shame into a noble, glorious rising. Our dying full of sorrow into holy, blissful life. Just as our contrariness here on earth brings us pain, shame and sorrow, so grace brings us surpassing comfort, glory and bliss in heaven. And that shall be a property of blessed love, that we shall know in God, which we might never have known without first experiencing woe. So grace is forgiveness and completeness with God, never punishment or anger. Finally, I want to leave you with words of reassurance. Julian saw that despite the at times overwhelming suffering of the world, that God was here in it with us, and that ultimately he was working all things for the good. The most famous quote from her writings is this, when she says, "And all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be exceeding well." If you read the rest of her writings, you'll see that this isn't blind optimism. It's a truth she believed because she firmly believed that she was one with God who was present in everything. And so despite everything, and remember she had suffered much, she could only expect that all would be well. Julian was not some philosopher agonizing over her thoughts in some university. She was a humble woman at a time when most women had little or no status. She only saw the inside of one room for years and years, and yet she knew that all would be well. We were born knitted together with our Creator God, who is a God of love, not anger, and who is making all things good. We thank God for the inspiration he gave to Julian. I offer her thoughts and her message to you today in the hope that in these days of our own isolation from other people, our own confinement in our own homes, our own fears over what this virus is doing to those we love and to our world, I offer these words and hope that they bring you comfort and inspiration. Been good to share with you all in this way again. Dawn and I really miss sharing with you in person, and we're very much looking forward to the day when we can share in person for real. For now, we cling to that truth that all will be well and all manner of things shall be well. And that's a thought echoed in our closing song, which says, "Yet once again," the chorus of which says, "Evil shall perish and righteousness shall reign."